My sister demanded our family house after Dad passed. When we refused, she moved in and changed the locks. We cut off the power, the water, and made her life a nightmare. But when she destroyed the house out of spite, we caught everything on camera. Now she's the one begging for mercy. I used to believe that family was everything. That no matter what happened, blood would always be thicker than water. But when my father passed away, I learned the truth. Family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. And loyalty? That was something my family had none of. The funeral was quiet. Too quiet. My brother Mark stood stiffly in his black suit, avoiding my gaze. My younger sister, Clara, sat beside him, dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. She wasn't crying. She wanted people to think she was, but I knew better. Because while I had spent the last year taking care of our dying father, Clara had been spending his money. She had never cared about anyone but herself. And yet, as soon as the will was read, she looked at me with wide, expectant eyes. So, about the house. I clenched my fists. The grave wasn't even cold, and she was already thinking about what she could take. That was the moment I knew, this wasn't going to end peacefully. I stared at Clara, trying to process what she had just said. About the house. Our father had only been gone for a few hours, and she was already circling like a vulture. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside her, adjusting his tie. He wasn't as direct as Clara, but I could see it in his eyes. He was thinking the same thing. We should talk about it, Mark finally said, clearing his throat. It's a big decision. We need to figure out what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? They meant best for them. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice steady. Dad's will was clear. The house belongs to all of us. We decide together. Clara let out a short laugh, mocking, sharp. Come on, John. Let's be real. You don't even need the house. You have your own place. But me? I've always lived here. It just makes sense that I keep it. I felt my jaw tighten. Clara had never paid a single bill in her life. She had lived off Dad's kindness, spending his money on designer bags and expensive vacations. And now, she wanted to take the only thing left of him? I took care of Dad, I said, my voice cold now. Where were you when he needed help? When he was too weak to even stand? You were out spending his money while I was making sure he lived his last days with dignity. For the first time, Clara looked uncomfortable. But it only lasted a second before she rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Don't act like you're some saint. You're just bitter because he still loved me more. Something inside me snapped. I should have known then, this wasn't just about the house. It was about power. Greed. Control. And if I didn't fight back? They would take everything. The room fell into a suffocating silence after Clara's words. You're just bitter because he still loved me more. I had spent the past year watching over our father as he faded, holding his hand during the worst nights, cleaning up after his illness stole his dignity, making sure he was never alone. And Clara, she hadn't even been there at the end. Not when he was hooked up to machines, struggling to breathe. Not when he whispered his last words. Not when I sat beside his lifeless body, gripping his hand even though I knew he was gone. No, she had been at a spa retreat, too busy to visit. And now, she had the audacity to claim he loved her more. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. Clara thrived on getting under people's skin. She always had. If I let her provoke me now, I'd be playing into her game. So instead, I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. This isn't about love, Clara. This is about respect. And if you had any, you wouldn't be talking about taking Dad's house before he's even buried. Clara scoffed, tossing her perfectly styled hair over her shoulder. Oh, give me a break, John. Don't act like you care about the house. You have your own apartment, your own life. I've been living here for years. This house is mine. Her entitlement made my stomach turn. Dad left the house to all of us, Clara. That means we decide together. Ugh, you sound just like him, she snapped, her eyes flashing. Always so serious, always so righteous. No wonder he pitied you. He knew you were too uptight to ever be truly happy. That did it. The grief, the exhaustion, the sheer frustration of the past year crashed over me like a tidal wave. Shut up, Clara, I said, my voice dangerously low. She blinked, surprised. I had never spoken to her like that before. What? You heard me, I said, stepping closer. Shut up. For the first time, Clara looked uncomfortable. She glanced at Mark for support, but even he seemed hesitant to back her up. I turned to him. And what about you, Mark? You gonna tell me this is fair? That she deserves everything while we get nothing? Mark hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man, I think selling the house and splitting the money makes the most sense. It's fair that way. Fair? I laughed bitterly. You think Clara's just gonna hand over your share once she gets the house? She doesn't want to sell, Mark. She wants to keep it. That means you get nothing. Mark frowned, glancing at Clara. Wait, is that true? Clara rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be an idiot. Of course I wouldn't leave you out, Mark. But you both have your own places. You don't need this house. I do. I deserve it. I could see the wheels turning in Mark's head. He wasn't the smartest, but he wasn't stupid either. He knew Clara well enough to realize she was lying. I decided to push harder. How about this, Clara? If you want the house, buy us out. Give us our fair share, and it's yours. She stiffened. That's not how this works. That's exactly how it works, I said, folding my arms. If you want the house so badly, prove it. Pay us what it's worth. Silence. Clara's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. But she didn't have one. Finally, she sighed dramatically. Ugh. You're both so greedy. Fine. I'll think about it. She wouldn't. We all knew that. She expected us to roll over and let her take everything. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I should have known Clara wouldn't just think about it. That was never her style. She was a manipulator, a spoiled brat who had spent her whole life getting what she wanted through lies, guilt, and charm. If she couldn't have the house by demanding it, she'd find another way to take it. I just didn't expect her to move so fast. The next morning, my phone buzzed as I was pouring my first cup of coffee. A message from Mark. Mark, dude. You need to see this. Check your email. My stomach tightened as I grabbed my laptop. I hadn't even opened my inbox yet, but I already knew Clara had done something. I clicked on the email from Mark. Subject, WTF? Attached was a forwarded message, an email Clara had sent to our extended family late last night. From Clara Reynolds. To Reynolds Family Group Chat. Subject, Dad's house situation. Hey everyone. I just wanted to update you all on what's been going on since Dad's passing. It's been really tough, but I'm doing my best to keep the family home together. Unfortunately, John and Mark are pressuring me to sell the house, even though they both have their own places. I've begged them to let me keep our childhood home, but they're more interested in making money off Dad's death than preserving his memory. I know Dad would have wanted me to stay here. It's where I belong. I hate to bring this up, but I could really use some support right now. If you agree that I should be able to stay in our home, please reach out to John and Mark and tell them. Maybe if enough people speak up, they'll realize they're being selfish. Thanks for your love and support. Clara. I gritted my teeth. This was classic Clara. She didn't argue like a normal person. She didn't fight fair. Instead, she played the victim. And worse, she was trying to turn the entire family against us. Within minutes, my phone started lighting up with texts and calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Aunt Rachel, John, how could you do this to your sister? Uncle Pete, I thought you were the responsible one. This is disappointing. Cousin Sarah, ugh, this is making me sick. Selling the house? Seriously? I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe. I had just walked into Clara's first trap. She wanted to make me look like the bad guy. She knew that most of the family would take her side without bothering to hear mine. She was betting on it. And for a moment, I almost fell into the same cycle I had for years, defending myself, trying to explain, trying to make everyone see the truth. But then, something clicked. I was done playing by her rules. Instead of responding to the texts, I called Mark. Did you see this? He answered immediately. Yeah. And if we don't shut it down now, she'll have the whole family convinced we're monsters. Mark groaned. I already have 5 missed calls. Aunt Linda just left a voicemail about how disappointed Dad would be. Clara really knows how to work people, huh? She does, I agreed. But I think it's time we stop playing defense. What do you mean? I said, smiling for the first time in days. Clara thinks she's the only one who can manipulate people. Let's show her what happens when she tries to play us. Mark was silent on the other end of the phone. I could hear him breathing, thinking. You really think we can turn this around? He finally asked. Clara thinks she controls the game, I said, leaning back in my chair. But she forgets, Dad raised me to think ahead. And I've been playing fair for too long. Mark let out a short laugh, still uncertain. All right, man. I'm listening. What's the plan? I glanced at my inbox, at the flood of emails and messages from family members who had already chosen sides before even hearing the full story. I wasn't angry at them. I was angry at Clara for using them. First, we're not going to defend ourselves, I said. What? But. No, I cut him off. That's what she wants. She wants us to argue, to explain, to waste time trying to convince people who have already made up their minds. But you know what happens when someone overplays their hand? Mark was quiet for a second before responding. People start asking questions. Exactly, I said. So here's what we do. We don't react. We wait. And then? Then we let Clara hang herself with her own lies. For the next 2 days, I ignored every text, every call, every guilt-tripping voicemail from extended family. Clara's plan was simple: create a firestorm, force me and Mark to surrender out of sheer exhaustion. But she underestimated something. She was used to getting immediate reactions. When someone ignored her, she panicked. Sure enough, on the 3rd day, Mark forwarded me another email Clara had sent to the family group chat. From Clara Reynolds. To Reynolds family group chat. Subject: It's worse than I thought. Hey everyone. I tried reaching out to John and Mark privately, but they won't even talk to me. I'm devastated. This isn't just about Dad's house anymore, it's about respect. I just found out that they've already spoken to a real estate agent and are planning to put the house on the market behind my back. I'm heartbroken. This house is my last connection to Dad, and they're treating it like a business transaction. I don't know what to do. I hate asking for help, but if anyone in the family can talk to them, please do. Maybe they'll listen to reason. Clara. Mark called me the second he read it. John, we have a problem. I smirked. No, we don't. She does. Dude, she just told everyone we're selling the house. That's a total lie. Exactly, I said. And now, she's going to have to prove it. Mark was still catching up. What are you saying? She jumped the gun, I explained. She thought if she made us look like villains, the family would turn on us. But there's one problem with her story. there is no real estate agent. We haven't talked to anyone about selling the house. She made that up. So, I said, when people start asking us about it, all we have to do is tell the truth. Clara lied. And once people see that, they'll start wondering what else she's lying about. Mark let out a slow breath. Damn, that's cold, man. You still in? I asked. Hell yes, he said without hesitation. I didn't respond to any family members, but Mark did. And all he said was, I have no idea what Clara is talking about. We haven't spoken to any real estate agents. Ask her where she got that information. It spread like wildfire. Within hours, I got a message from Aunt Linda. Aunt Linda, Clara said you were selling the house, but Mark says that's not true. What's going on? I finally responded. Me, Linda, I love you, but I think you already know what's happening. Clara lied. And this isn't the first time. That was it. That was all I needed to say. Because once one person started doubting Clara's story, others did too. By the end of the night, Mark forwarded me a final email from Clara. From Clara Reynolds. To Reynolds Family Group Chat. Subject, some clarifications. Hey everyone. I think there's been some confusion about my last email. I may have misunderstood some things, and I don't want to cause any unnecessary drama. I just really love this house, and I don't want to lose it. I hope we can all talk this through calmly. Thanks for understanding. Clara. Mark called me, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Did you see that? He gasped. She backed down. I've never seen her back down. She had no choice, I said, smiling. She knows she lost. Now she's trying to save face. So what now? Now? I leaned back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Now, we decide what's fair. Without her lies in the way. For the first time in my life, I wasn't playing Clara's game anymore. And that? That was the real victory. For the first time in my life, I had beaten Clara at her own game. She had tried to manipulate the family, turn them against us, and paint herself as the victim. But when she got caught in her lie, she had no choice but to retreat. At least, that's what I thought. Because if there was one thing I should have known by now, it was that Clara never gave up so easily. And I had underestimated just how far she was willing to go. For the next few days, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Mark and I started discussing real solutions, whether we wanted to sell the house and split the money or find another way to make things fair. For the first time since Dad's passing, I felt like I had control. Like we were moving forward. Then, on the fourth day, Mark called me. You're not gonna believe this. What now? I sighed, already exhausted. Clara moved into the house. Silence. I gripped my phone tighter. What did you just say? She moved in, John, Mark repeated. She's in the house right now. She brought her stuff, changed the locks, it's like she's already decided it's hers. I felt my jaw clench. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was war. Breaking and entering? Or just another scam? I drove straight to the house. When I got there, Clara was lounging in the living room like she had been living there for years. A glass of wine in her hand. A smug smile on her face. What the hell do you think you're doing? I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. She sipped her wine, completely unfazed. I live here now. I took a slow breath, forcing myself not to explode. You don't own this house, Clara. Neither do you, she shot back. Dad left it to all of us. And since no one's making a decision, I figured I'd just move in. I shook my head in disbelief. You changed the locks? Oh, relax, she said, rolling her eyes. I just had a locksmith replace the old ones. It's for security. You can have a copy if you want. I stared at her, my mind racing. This wasn't just entitlement anymore. This was strategic. She knew that as long as she was inside, it would be harder to remove her legally. She was squatting in our house. And worse? She was daring us to do something about it. She can't do this, right? Mark asked later that night. We were sitting in my apartment, both of us still trying to process what had happened. I mean, it's illegal, right? Just moving in without permission? I ran a hand down my face. It should be. But squatters' rights are a real thing, Mark. If we're not careful, she could actually claim legal residency. Mark's face paled. Are you serious? I nodded. If she stays long enough, and we don't officially contest it, she can argue she has a right to live there. So what do we do? I took a deep breath. We fight smart. We don't let her settle in. And we make her life a living hell until she leaves on her own. Mark arched an eyebrow. You sure about that? You really think she'll just give up? I leaned forward, my voice firm. She will. Because for the first time in her life, she's the one who's going to be uncomfortable. Clara thought she had one. She thought moving into the house and changing the locks would make her untouchable. That she could dig in, sit pretty, and force Mark and me to cave, either by giving up and letting her keep the house or by selling it under her terms. She thought we'd get frustrated and walk away. But Clara had made one crucial mistake. She underestimated how far we were willing to go. The first thing I did the next morning was call a lawyer. If Clara thought she could outmaneuver us, she was in for a rude awakening. I explained the situation, and the lawyer laid out my options. She's not a tenant, he said. She doesn't have a lease. She wasn't invited by the rightful owners of the house. That means she has no legal claim to residency. So we can kick her out? I asked. Not exactly, he said. You still have to go through the formal process. You need to serve her an official eviction notice. Give her a deadline. If she doesn't leave, then you escalate it legally. And how long does that take? Depends on the state. Could be a few weeks. Could be longer if she tries to fight it. Weeks. Maybe months. I wasn't going to let her get comfortable that long. While the eviction process began, Mark and I took matters into our own hands. If Clara wanted to live in the house so badly, we'd make sure she didn't enjoy a single second of it. Step 1. Cutting her off. Mark had access to the utility accounts. What happens if we stop paying the electricity bill? He asked me over the phone. She'll have no power. And the water? She can't shower, she can't cook, she can't even flush the toilet, I said with a smirk. Mark exhaled. Done. Within 24 hours, Clara's luxury squat life became a nightmare. The first text came that night. Clara, WTF? The power is out. I ignored it. An hour later. Clara, the water isn't working. This is illegal, John. I still didn't respond. By the morning, she was calling non-stop. Mark was grinning ear to ear when he picked up one of her calls. Oh, wow, the utilities aren't working? That's weird, he said, feigning concern. I guess Dad's accounts were shut down, huh? Guess you should have thought of that before moving in. Clara screamed at him. But she couldn't do a damn thing about it. She wanted to play house, but she couldn't survive without water and electricity. By the second night, we took things further. Since the house was still legally ours, we had every right to be there. So, Mark and I started showing up at random times. We'd let ourselves in, walk around like we owned the place, because we did. We'd turn on lights, open windows, make a mess, slam doors. We made it impossible for her to relax. You can't just come in whenever you want. Clara shrieked at one point. Actually, we can, I said calmly. We still own the house. You're the trespasser here. The cracks in her confidence were showing. She looked tired. Frazzled. She was realizing she had made a mistake. The final straw came on day 4. We changed the Wi-Fi password. Clara stormed into the kitchen where Mark and I were casually having coffee, her face red with rage. She started, but I held up my hand. No, let me guess, I interrupted, smirking. The Wi-Fi's out? What the hell is wrong with you two? She snapped. I can't work like this. I have things to do. I can't live without power, without water, without internet. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Then maybe you should leave. She froze. Mark, standing beside me, folded his arms. You wanted to play dirty, Clara? You thought you could just move in and take what you wanted, he said. Well, welcome to reality. You don't get to win this one. Her breathing was shallow. She was trapped, and she knew it. Fine, she finally muttered, voice shaking. I'll leave. Victory. But before I could enjoy it, she glared at me. But don't think this is over. I should have known she wouldn't leave quietly. The moment she spat out, don't think this is over, I felt it in my gut, this wasn't just a retreat. It was a regrouping. Clara was planning something. And I wasn't wrong. 3 days after she left the house, I woke up to a barrage of messages. Mark, get to the house. Now. My stomach clenched. Then came a forwarded message. From Reynolds family group chat. Subject, urgent, John and Mark destroyed Dad's house. I didn't even read the whole thing before I grabbed my keys and sped over. When I pulled up to the house, I froze. The front yard was trashed. Windows smashed. Spray paint covered the walls, ugly words scrawled in bright red. Selfish bastards. This was Dad's house. You'll pay for this. My blood ran cold. The front door was wide open, and when I stepped inside, my worst fears were confirmed. Clara had destroyed the place. The living room was in shambles, furniture slashed open, glass shattered across the floor. The kitchen. Every cabinet ripped open, dishes smashed against the walls. It was like a tornado had torn through. And that wasn't the worst part. Clara had called the police. By the time I got there, 2 officers were already on scene, talking to Mark. Clara stood off to the side, fake tears glistening in her eyes, playing the victim, just like always. I stormed up to Mark. What the hell happened? He gave me a sharp look. She's claiming we trashed the place. I turned to Clara, barely able to contain my rage. You did this. She gasped, stepping back like I had just threatened her. Are you serious, John? Look at this mess. This was my home. How could you do this to Dad's memory? The sheer audacity made my vision blur with anger. You're unbelievable, I muttered. Sir, calm down, one of the officers said, stepping between us. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay level-headed. Losing my temper wouldn't help. Mark had his arms crossed. We didn't do this, he told the officers. We literally just got here. That's not what she says, one officer replied, nodding toward Clara. She put on her best broken girl act, dabbing at her dry eyes. I came back to get the last of my things, and I found it like this, she sniffled. I don't even feel safe anymore. She was setting us up. She wanted to make it look like we had trashed our own house out of spite, just to punish her. And if the cops believed her, she could sue us. She could drag this into court. She could delay everything, force us to keep paying for a destroyed house while she played the victim. Mark's jaw clenched. We need to prove we didn't do this. I exhaled slowly. We can. Clara had made one major mistake. She had gotten sloppy. While the officers took notes, I calmly pulled out my phone and tapped on my security app. Officers, I said, lifting the screen. I installed security cameras last week. You might want to see this. The color drained from Clara's face. You what? She stammered. I smirked, finally seeing fear in her eyes. You didn't know? Oh, that's a shame. Let's take a look. I hit play. The footage loaded, crystal clear. And there she was. Clara. Inside the house. Trashing it with her own hands. Ripping curtains, throwing plates, even stopping to admire her work in the reflection of a broken mirror. The officers watched in silence. Clara froze. Her entire face drained of color. I turned to her, my voice low. You really thought you'd get away with it? One officer turned to Clara, voice flat. Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back. Her eyes went wide. Wait, no, no. Too late. As the cuffs snapped around her wrists, Clara screamed. You can't do this to me. I'm your sister, John. I met her gaze. Not anymore. She was arrested for trespassing, destruction of property, and filing a false police report. And just like that, she was out of our lives. The family finally saw her for who she was. Mark and I sold the house and split the money fairly. For the first time in years, I felt free. Because, in the end, family isn't about blood. It's about who actually deserves to be in your life. And Clara? She never did.